Virginia will decide who will be its next governor in a little more than a week, and some are calling this race the first major electoral test of the Biden presidency. With the race neck and neck, former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe and businessman Glenn Youngkin are making their last-ditch efforts to win over voters. Ed O'Keefe spoke to both candidates about the big names supporting them and about the more divisive issues during the campaign.
Vice President Kamala Harris campaigning last night for Terry McAuliffe, giving a statewide race even more national attention.
I want this man to be elected the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
She's just the latest big-name Democrat to campaign for McAuliffe in an effort to motivate Democratic voters as the party's agenda stalls.
Are you in a tight race because of what's going on in Washington with the president and congressional Democrats?
Listen, I think this election is about what's happening here in Virginia. I do think, Ed, in fairness, people want to see action up in Washington.
While Virginia's voted Democratic in recent presidential elections, President Biden's big win last year came with a divisive name on the ballot. McAuliffe's trying something many other Democrats are expected to do in elections next year, linking his opponent to former President Trump.
Glenn Youngkin is not a reasonable Republican. He is a Trump acolyte.
Would it be helpful if former President Trump came to campaign for you?
Nobody's coming to campaign with me.
Trump has endorsed Youngkin, but to stay competitive in the closing stretch, the candidate is keeping his distance.
But I am campaigning for me, not like my opponent, who is bringing anybody he can into Virginia because he knows that his campaign is sinking.
And he's found traction by emphasizing something else.
We will teach history, but I will ban critical race theory.
Youngkin's keeping his focus on parental involvement in education and controversial concepts like critical race theory.
No wonder Terry wants parents out of it, and he wants to insert government between parents and their children.
That focus resonates with voters like Juliet Schweiter.
Enough is enough. It's time that parents take it back, take control back of their schools.
McAuliffe dismissed the issue as made up.
Critical race theory has never been taught in Virginia. This is a racist dog whistle.
Will it be in the future?
No.
Ed O'Keefe is here to discuss. Really interesting story, Ed. You sat down with Terry McAuliffe yesterday, as we saw, and you asked him why he thinks this race is so close. I want to play some of that sound.
This is an off year. Presidential, I think we're pretty much a blue state in presidential, but we clearly are always purple in the off year. And as you know, for 44 straight years, the party that wins the White House, the other party wins the governor's mansion. I'm, of course, the only one to break it. I won in 13, and President Obama won in 12. There's always a little bit of kickback. So literally for 44 years, whoever wins the White House, the other party. So, you know, I'm trying to buck a big trend, but people were happy when I was governor.
So, you know, McAuliffe has sort of defined the polls before, but, you know, what are his chances that he'll able to do that again? And, you know, once the final votes are counted, there'll actually be a larger distance between the two candidates.
Yeah, we should point out, Virginia is one of, I think, the only state now that doesn't allow its governors to run for a second consecutive term. So he was governor from 2013, or elected governor in 2013. And served from 2014 to 2018, stepped away and has been called back by Democrats to do it again. He's hoping to defy history twice, hoping the lightning will strike twice. We'll see. Makes the point that this is a state, more than most, that is influenced by national political trends because usually, historically, this is the 44-year history thing he's talking about, usually this state will elect a governor from the party opposite the one that won the White House the year before. So history would suggest a Republican will win this year, and recent polling suggests that could happen. And so, you know, with the president's numbers now underwater, not only in this state, but across the country, will there be enough enthusiasm among Democrats to turn out enough voters? And can they win back independents who in many ways, according to our polling here, no longer support the president? We'll see. But, you know, the other thing to keep in mind, if you're someone on the outside looking in, this state, in its competitive statewide elections, it's usually a single-digit win by either candidate. Not something that's won by double digits. So close contests are part of what goes on here. The difference this time, of course, is given how close this is right now in our polling and in other surveys, it could be a long night.
You know what? It's not just how people feel about the president, it's also how they feel about Congress. There's been a lot of talk, but none of these sort of more lofty, larger pieces of legislation have been passed. Voting, police reform, and now, every single day we're covering how Democrats can't seem to get it together when it comes to social spending. You asked whether or not he felt that what is happening with Congress could also be a factor in this race. I want to play some of that.
I think this election is about what's happening here in Virginia. I do think, Ed, in fairness, people want to see action up in Washington. They really are tired of bickering. They want to see results. They want to see everybody come together. Forget about my election. I am desperate for this infrastructure bill. I mean, that's $7 billion for roads just for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think people like it when government works. I operate in a very bipartisan way. I got 70+% of my bills passed with a Republican legislature. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Is it a good idea? Does it move Virginia forward? And I think that's why so many Republicans have endorsed me.
So I guess I'm a little confused. We've got okay, it's what's going on in Virginia, but hey, we've got some big name Democrats, coming down the road from Washington to help me out. So I guess the question is what's happening in Washington, could that have an impact on the race? Or is he right that, Virginians just wanted to focus on what you were going to do for them as their representative, as their governor?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a mix of both, as it usually is, in part because, you could look off over the horizon and you'd see the skyline of Washington here in Northern Virginia, the most populous part of the state, the part where elections are won. Most people who live here in Alexandria, for example, are doing something to do with the federal government or the military. So they're naturally attuned to national political trends, national stories, and what's going on across the river at the Capitol or what's not going on. And that's why you've seen Virginia Democratic members of Congress say, we've got to get this done because it'll help Terry win that election. He's not wrong, or they're not wrong to say that, because the moment the White House can demonstrate results, the thinking is there'll be enough enthusiasm of Democratic voters, independent voters, to come out and reward them by re-electing Terry McAuliffe. We'll see. But this is it is a unique situation. And you mentioned the big names coming out. Former President Obama will be here in the state tomorrow. The President and First Lady will campaign again for McAuliffe next week. But we should point out that both of those guys and the First Lady are also campaigning up in New Jersey, which is the other state that holds an election in this odd-numbered year. And there are some surveys suggesting that it's become a closer race between the Democrat and Republican, in part, again, because of the president's slipping popularity and the potential dampening enthusiasm among Democratic voters or independents who may have otherwise been supportive of the Democratic candidate.
Well, who's not coming out to get involved in this race? The former President Donald Trump. He's not coming out to campaign for Youngkin, the Republican candidate, as we saw in your story, though he has endorsed him several times. McAuliffe is really trying to link Youngkin to Donald Trump. Youngkin has been working very hard to, I guess, create some distance or to sort of suggest that he is a Republican on his own, but not, not being overly critical of the former president. How is this working for McAuliffe, this attempt at linking his opponent to the former president?
Yeah, he's really tried to drive home that point just in the last, he'd been doing it over the course of the campaign, but now he's doing it on the airwaves, so it's intensified. I don't think we're going to have a good handle on whether or not that's working now until Election Day itself. But if you have McAuliffe trying to tie him again, remind voters that this is as he put it last night at an event, a Trump acolyte, and you have the Republican Youngkin trying to use issues like education and critical race theory to whip up support among Republican-based voters, you can see where this sort of sits. Is this a referendum on the former president, or is this a referendum on the current president, or is there some other issue of local concern that's going to sway just enough voters? Youngkin has made very clear, despite the fact that he's been endorsed by the former president, has said publicly that he supported his election and appreciates the endorsement. He is campaigning on his own. He is not bringing in the former president, hasn't held many events with other outside of Virginia Republicans, and says he wants to win this on his own. But the former president had signaled he'd be happy to come here and hold a rally. It seems Republicans have told him, no, stay away. You are a bit too nuclear for our liking here. Recent surveys have shown that the most unpopular political figure in this state is, in fact, the former president, who polls just in the low 40s. Not good enough to help Youngkin.
Yeah, but Youngkin's still sort of dipping into some of the greatest hits, though, if you will, of the former president. So we're talking about critical race theory. I was kind of surprised that that came up in your story and that that's an actual issue in this race. I thought we pretty much covered it, that critical race theory is something that is debated at the college level. But we're still talking about whether or not it should be banned in schools. How is this topic, critical race theory, taught in schools in Virginia? Can we just get that clear first? Is it taught in Virginia? Thank you. Very clear. You don't have to explain. The answer is no. That being said, why is it part of this race?
So if you watch certain channels, if you read certain websites, if you listen to the comments of certain conservatives or Republicans, they have really stoked, inspired, encouraged a lot of the activism and the outpouring of concern you've seen at local school board meetings across the country this year about a host of issues, whether it's potential social policy being taught in school, concerns about, gender neutral bathrooms, or other issues beyond basic 1, 2, 3s and ABCs. And so there have been a few instances of this in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is one of the most populous and wealthiest counties in this state, that had a few incidents along these lines where there's been concern about these kinds of issues being discussed in the classroom, just like you're seeing down in Texas, as you're seeing in other states. And so Republicans understand that this is something that motivates their voters. They're not focused on attacking the president personally. They're not necessarily using other issues that might come up in these kinds of elections, but they believe that parental control of childhood education is one that can whip up their support. You turn on Fox News these days, it's something they talk about almost every hour for whatever reason. McAuliffe turns around and says this isn't an issue. Critical race theory has not been taught in Virginia schools. He told me it will not be taught in Virginia schools if he's reelected governor, and that he believes that this is essentially a racist dog whistle. He points out that 4 years ago, what Republicans did was raise concerns about the prevalence of the MS-13 gang among Latinos, not only here in Northern Virginia, but across the country. But they've got a presence here, certainly, in Northern Virginia. And they tried to use that issue, he said 4 years ago, to stoke concern among Republican voters and independents and get them to turn out. And it didn't work. And he says it's not going to work this time either. So, good example of the issue of concern for Republicans. And yet it may be working, because McAuliffe himself in a debate had said he didn't think there should be any parental control over education. They turned that into a campaign ad, and then the numbers started to tighten. So clearly there's something afoot here in Virginia when it comes to parental control of education or parental input. McAuliffe has had to spend ad time explaining that those comments were taken out of context. He said, look, I vetoed a bill that essentially would have allowed 25 parents to come into the classroom and suggest 25 different books to read to the kids. And we just can't have that, he said. But it's something that appears to be working for the Republicans, and we'll see if that's the ticket or if the Democrats are able to prevail.
If politicians want to talk about education, there are plenty of issues when it comes to education, plenty of ways in which we have failed to fund the education system in this country. We don't need to make up an issue. We've got plenty of real things to talk about. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.
Take care.